So my understanding, and I don't know if you'll agree with this, that the difference between a religious person and a spiritual person is the fact that a religious person believes in hell and a spiritual person has been there. Haven't we? See, I had to lighten things up a wee bit. This image that you're looking at is the Hindu goddess of knowledge, music, and the creative arts. Her name is Saraswati. How'd I do, Devika?
You did great.
Okay.
I thought we were celebrating Diwali today.
Okay. Not today, October 23rd. Anyway, one of the things that I do so appreciate about Hinduism is the diversity that it encompasses. Temples will generally include multiple images of the divine presence, and a lot of the different places of worship will display prominent symbols of more than one denomination. Now that, to me, is the epitome of unity and diversity, a true coming together of the different traditions. So as I finish out this month speaking about peace, I do want to invite you to contemplate that idea with the intention of expanding that peace on a global level. It isn't just right here in these United States, right? It's global. And I know we're seeing a lot of that right now. So I've been addressing a couple Sanskrit words that Chopra talks about in this book. The first couple weeks ago I talked about Siva, the idea that your actions harm no one and benefit everyone. A couple weeks ago I spoke about Simran, remembering your true nature and what your purpose is for being here. And this morning I want to speak to the idea of Satsang. And the meaning of that is actually Sat means divine and Sangha means company. So, in Indian philosophy, it means the company of the highest truth. And basically what that means, it's a gathering of people who listen, talk about, and assimilate truth together. It's kind of what we do here, isn't it? The idea of Satsang is to develop and strengthen the divine love consciousness. We all have it. When we gather, we're able to share and grow that consciousness. In Peace is the way Chopra explains Satsang is the idea that you belong to a community of peace and wisdom. It brings the knowledge that in reality, we don't have any enemies. The idea that you're at home in the world, and you recognize that the rest of the human family is indeed part of you. The vision he holds is that the older and the younger generations are no longer separated by that gap. Instead, they work together toward the vision of a world without poverty, without ignorance, without violence. And I think that's a beautiful vision that we can all hold. Now, the media doesn't necessarily show us. However, there is headway being made from people from all regions of the world, from all walks of life, being united by a common vision. And that vision is to strengthen and to sustain an actively compassionate humanity. I think you see that part on the news when people come together after one of these tragedies have occurred, whether it's here in the United States or in Paris or anywhere. This is a really tough subject for me because I find it, I don't get it. I don't get why people don't do nice things, right? And I suppose that's a good thing, because if I understood it, then I would have that same mentality. And that's kind of how I have to look at it. What I do know is collectively we can eradicate the differences in people to bring about a new common human community, one where we can be okay with one another. So how can we have that begin to show up in our lives? How can we be part of that magnificent vision? Well, one way is through selfless service. It's a powerful way, it's a productive way to bring people together for a higher purpose, working together across boundaries, whether it's religious affiliations or ethnicity, any barrier that we decide to call real. And in truth, those barriers from the Indian philosophy are referred to as Maya or illusions. They aren't real. And you know, from that higher perspective, we know that. We know they aren't real. The Gita says the ignorant, not the wise, consider the path of self-knowledge and the path of selfless service as different from each other. The person who has truly mastered one gets the benefit of both. When we first started Common Ground, and a few of you are going to remember this, we started with the idea of Satsang. We didn't hold Sunday services at first. We would gather women's wisdom, and then we also started a project that we brought different people together through service. We hosted a plastic bag party. Many of you will remember that. What we were doing is collecting plastic bags, cutting them up, and sending them off to Nicaragua because women down there were creating purses and bags to sell for an income. And it was a beautiful thing. The project was as much about bringing people together as it was helping the women earn an income. We were very fortunate. We had women from different traditions and backgrounds that came together. And we came together in a harmonious alignment for a greater cause. We had people from the Lutheran Church, from the Catholic Church, from the LDS Church, from the Muslim temple? Mosque, thank you. And we also had people that were affiliated with Common Ground. It was a beautiful example of letting go of the idea of us versus them. We were all one. We were working toward a common cause, a common goal for the betterment of humanity. It was our way of raising collective consciousness, that awareness that we are one single humanity. And we promoted that as a way of daily thinking, of daily being and acting. And instead of identifying these friends as a label, as Lutheran and Catholic and LDS and Muslim and us, we merged into that one divinely human, great I am. And we all recognized that. It was really wonderful. Rumi said, out beyond the ideas of wrongdoing and right doing, there is a field. I will meet you there. Altruism is imprinted on our genes. And several animals below us on the evolutionary ladder sacrificed their lives to save their offspring or defend a colony that's at risk of dying themselves. Penguins are just one example. After that mother lays the egg, she has to leave her community searching for food for the baby, for the father, and for herself. So the father stays behind, enduring that bitter cold, because he's actually protecting that egg. And so he's not only protecting the egg from the cold, he's also preventing that egg from touching or falling down to the ice, which would ensure death for this chick. Now the process takes months, and it's a great sacrifice from both the mother and the father. And it's not uncommon for one or both of those parents to fall victim to that harsh weather conditions. Nor is it unheard of, after all their sacrifice, that the chick doesn't survive. They're willing to do what needs to be done out of that place of love. And altruism is what we need more of to create and to share peace in our world today. And the best place to start, right, is with you. That's where peace always begins. So come up with some creative ideas where you can resolve a conflict in your own life. My guess is we all have a conflict or two in our own life. Maybe you have a conflict with a family member or a coworker. Create an idea that you can help with your community, our nation, or the world. And you simply start by changing an old habit of yours that isn't working any longer. Offer kind words that maybe you've never thought of saying before. Think of an activity that brings people together with joy. The purpose is to bond with other people, because when you do that, you create a mutual trust. And when you trust, there is no need for that underlying hostility and suspicion. Those are the two greatest enemies of peace. If you transform yourself into a peacemaker and share that with other people, you can no longer be anti-anything. And what a beautiful place to be. Even if you don't see an immediate decline in violence in the world, you will know that in your heart you have dedicated yourself to that peace. The single best reason I can think of to become a peacemaker is that every other approach in my lifetime has failed. So let's be, let's live, let's share that peace that we want to see in this world. Let's be that. That's what we're called to do. And humanity's strength comes from critical mass. Again, we've seen that, whether it was in New Orleans or San Bernardino or France or Turkey or wherever, right? People come together. And the truth is this: we're not here to make the world evolve. We are here to evolve as individuals and then to spread that influence. That's what we're called to do. We don't need to demand of ourselves that we alone have to be the agent of change. That's a pretty heavy burden. In a fire brigade, everyone passes a bucket, but only the last person puts the fire out. We don't necessarily know where we stand in line, nor does it really matter, as long as we're participating. We may be here to pass a bucket, or we may be called to play a different role. Our work is to be open to what that is. In either case, our responsibility is to be open to whatever Spirit has put in front of us, and to be willing to do that. So we want to direct our thoughts, our words, and our actions toward peace. Then we let the results be what they will be, because we know we've done our part, and that we can remember that in reality, God is in charge and all is well. That's from that higher perspective. Peace is love in action. And when we've been hurt, we tend to close our hearts. We feel that with all the different things going on. We feel that pain with these tragedies happening in the world today. We tend to harden our hearts against those who we see as harming us. And until and unless our heart is softened and our natural state of love can flow freely, we cannot be in peace. Our work is to reopen the block that is hindering that flow of love. A great thinker said this: frankly, there isn't anyone you couldn't learn to love once you've heard their story. And I'm wondering if any of you know who said that. Mr. Rogers, can you believe it? There isn't anyone you couldn't learn to love once you've heard their story. I've been singing that since last night, okay? It's driving me. the neighborhood. Was I not doing that this morning, Greg? And he's like, what are you doing? You can't get it out of your head, and now I'm sharing that with you. You're welcome. He also, thanks Gina, he also came up with some really beautiful life lessons, and I'm just going to share a few of those with you. The first one, accept others. The entire idea behind his show was the door was always open to everyone. Even in that time, during that time, it was of tumultuous racial strife. Because remember, that show debuted in the late 60s. He was a supporter of social progress and an advocate of diversity. He said, finding ways to harmonize our uniqueness with the uniqueness of others can be the most fun and the most rewarding of all. He also said, recognize how wonderfully unique you are, and remember that others are not as different as their appearances may suggest. Sometimes we forget that one, don't we? Making the world a better place, he said, is everyone's responsibility. We can't say they need to fix it. It's about them doing something different. Every one of us has a responsibility at some level. And my favorite is be kind. Always and no matter what. Seems like such a simple little rule, doesn't it? If there's a situation where you feel your heart is closed, which is certainly understandable with the amount of violence happening around the world right now, remember that all of these people, the victims and even the offenders, have families. They are loved by someone. Everyone's family is experiencing pain and heartbreak and disappointment for different reasons maybe. They are all feeling that. When we don't know their story and understand, in no way am I condoning what's happening and what's been done. I just believe that we're called to look at this from a higher perspective, from that place of reality, from that place of being a spiritual being having this human experience. And I say this because if we feel and generate that hate and that anger, it's adding to the violence. And that's what we're trying to disintegrate, right? Get things back to center, back to balance. We're called to remember to love and to recognize that all beings, even the offenders, all beings are part of the great whole. Now, that's tough to say, and hopefully it's not tough to hear. It's the truth. And it's not easy to do. I get that. I totally get that. So that said, I'd like to invite all of you to join me. There are 2 Thursdays in August at 11 o'clock in the morning where I'm going to be holding a peace prayer meditation. And it'll just be for like an hour, 45 minutes to an hour. We can work on this together. That is so powerful to do it together. We can send our thoughts, our prayers, our spirit of peace to all people involved in all the conflicts around the world. That gives us the opportunity to learn and to grow in patience and in compassion. We can move ourselves toward that reconciliation and love. And we might even find ourselves in gratitude for the lessons that it's teaching us. So I'm going to close this morning with an absolutely beautiful quote by Thich Nhat Hanh. He reminds us that we need to be aware of the suffering, but retain our clarity, calmness, and strength so we can help transform the situation. And that's our goal, to help transform the situation. And we do that by accepting the principle of the oneness of humanity. We all know that's the truth. It's real difficult to see when people are behaving in ways that we don't agree with. It doesn't make it any less truthful, though. We simply need to become that peace that we wish to see in this world. Thank you so much for being here while I shared this truth as I understand it.